I lift my glass because that is what you do at a family dinner when the light over the table makes everything look softer than it is, when people clap for the good news and the house smells like roast and pride. The glass is cool between my fingers. I smile and say thank you. Someone tells a joke, the chandelier scatters the light, and for a blink the room seems kinder. Then I hear my name through the slightly open study door, and the sound lands in my chest like a thrown stone. Ethan says it first, easy and loud enough to carry. She finally has enough money to help save our family legacy. The words hit raw because they have always carried weight in this house. The kind of weight that makes you move as if the floor shifted under you. My father's voice follows, even-tempered, the voice that usually smooths edges. Let's not rush this. Claire is cautious with her finances. My mother's tone slides in, practiced, the voice she uses when she wants to sound gentle on camera. We've been discussing it for weeks. The vineyard needs investment now, not when she's ready. The crystal slips. It falls from my hand in a clean, furious sound, and shatters across the great oak floor. Cabernet sprays like a small crime, and spreads into the grain, a stain that will not forget. People lean to dab napkins at the spill. Someone murmurs apology. I bend and gather the larger pieces because that is what you do when something breaks. You try to pick up the pieces before they cut you. The cut on my finger is small, but the rest of it feels huge. $100,000, Ethan had said. The exact amount I have been saving for 6 years. The exact price of the cabin on Independent Ridge that I circle in my notebooks and trace in the margins when the city hums too loud and my hands ache from drawing elevations. I am 12 again and trailing after my father into the fermentation room with a spiral notebook like a talisman. He waved me away and taught Ethan how to taste sugar. Later that night he drove Ethan for ice cream to celebrate a C-. My awards were a thin stack in a junk drawer. I remember the way the magnet on the fridge displayed his certificates, and the way my own accomplishments were quiet, as if silence were expected. I push open my father's study door, and the three faces turn toward me. My mother smooths a smile into place like paint applied for appearance. We're proud of you, dear, she says in the voice of rehearsed affection. My hands have stopped shaking. Something inside me that used to know only panic has been replaced by clarity, the kind that arrives when you finally see the map of your life. You were planning to get my money, I say, for Ethan's tasting room. My father straightens in his chair, the wood creaking, and says, slow and deliberate, your brother has put his whole life into the vineyard. The Matthews name means something in this valley. Ethan leans back against the desk, arms folded like a man who believes the world owes him faith. This isn't just about you, he says. The expansion could double our revenue. It's the legacy. I can feel the years of small erasures like a pressure under my ribs, the nights I worked extra, the freelance projects I took on so I could save, the tiny rites of self-denial I kept in the margins of my life, so something I built would belong to me. That cabin wasn't a whim, it was a life plan. That money is for my cabin, I say. My investment in my future. Mother's lips press thin. So you'd put a vacation home above family? It's not a vacation home, I say. It's my future. The accusation they hand me is old and practiced. You've always been selfish, Claire, my father says. Always thinking about yourself instead of what the family has given you. They taught me to perform gratitude like a duty. They taught me to wait until it was safe to take up space. Tonight I refuse to perform. I say, calmly, I'm not giving you my money, not 1 cent. Ethan's face hardens. Then maybe you shouldn't tension yourself part of this family's future. It is an old threat, the final card in countless manipulations. For 30 years I have kept my head down, because the fear of being cut off from this family kept me obedient. The thing that shifts inside my chest at that moment is not only anger, it is a quiet, steady thing that feels like the beginning of a new instrument. The ability to choose. I leave not to smooth anything over, not to cave. And the next day an email sits in my inbox that burns like acid. Subject line: regarding strategies to secure Claire Matthews' contribution. It is a forwarded message from my father to the family financial advisor, my mother and Ethan Kopp. Paul, we need to present this as an opportunity, not a request. My father wrote, Claire has always been cautious with her money. We're thinking $100,000 for a 10% stake. My mother's reply is clinical. Remember to emphasize the family aspect. She's always wanted to be included. Ethan's signature at the bottom is the best knife. Let's call it Ethan's tasting room and the official paperwork. After all, I'm the one who's kept this place going while she's been building her little career. They planned a surgical strike around my promotion, timing the request to when the balance in my bank would make me viable. Not a daughter, a resource. I print the emails, tuck them into a folder, and sit in my car across the street from Bainbridge and Sons while they arrange themselves at the oak table like directors before a scene. I call in. This is Claire Matthews, I tell the receptionist. I'll be joining by phone, thank you. My voice sliding into the meeting like a bell. They act surprised. Those were private communications, my father says, in a tone that should have been apologetic and instead comes off practiced. About you, without you. How many other family members have you approached? I ask. Aunt Ellen admits that she gave them $50,000 last year for fermentation equipment that never arrived. The ledger of excuses crumbles. My phone pings with texts. Uncle Robert, don't let them pressure you. Cousin Stephanie, are you going to do your part for the family legacy? Grandmother's nurse. Your grandmother hopes you'll consider what family unity means at her age. The subtext is a blade. Refuse, and you might lose the soft room of grandmother's presence. The thought punches me in the gut. I do quick math in my head. 6 years of steady saving equals the cabin, give them $100,000, and I push my dream back 4 years. I have to go, I tell them. I end the call. The week that follows is a slow erosion. Facebook fills with a sunset post from Ethan. Captioned, family support makes dreams come true. Comments bloom from cousins and neighbors, assuming my consent. A voicemail from my mortgage officer uses careful language. Ms. Matthews, there are concerns about your financial commitments. Please call. Uncle Robert calls later with a breezy, I spoke with Mike Belton. They are whispering to gatekeepers. My family is throttling me in small, efficient ways. I spend nights fortifying my finances, like fortifying a house. Before a storm, changing passwords, requesting written communications from the bank, placing fraud alerts. I hire a financial advisor, split accounts, lock documents in drawers. At midnight, Nora calls with good news. The cabin price dropped 15%. The property is within reach. I laugh because sometimes the universe lines up for you. Then my mother shows up at my doorstep at 1 a.m, with a bottle of Matthews Reserve Vintage 1989, as if the past can be bought back into the present. This is what you'll receive if you invest, she says. A case of reserve wine every year. Your name on a plaque. Your children's future secured. The gift is a bribe dressed in ritual. My answer is quiet and final. My future isn't for sale, I tell her. Leave the bottle. A friend helps me draft an email that is not a plea. It is a boundary. I will not be coerced. Do not contact my bank. Respect my finances. I send it to the family. The act feels like laying a flag. When I drive through the ivy-covered gates of Renfield Vineyards the next Saturday, I am carrying a briefcase with my pre-arrival letter, a deed reservation, and a printed bound analysis. The oak table that has seen 4 generations of dinners looks smaller, or perhaps I have simply grown. I set copies of the reports in front of everyone. Thank you for inviting me, I say. Before we discuss any investment, I'd like to review the vineyard's actual performance. Numbers are merciless in a way words are not. The charts show profit margins, under 2%. A loss in 2019 of 35,000. A mere 12,000 profit in 2021 despite a tourism spike. A 20% shortfall in last year's harvest. Ethan's projection of a 30% upside is a castle built on sand. I move through slides like a person turning pages of a ledger that tells the truth. Aunt Ellen leans forward and says maybe professional management would be better than more family investment. The words drop heavy. And that night 3 potential investors withdrew. For the first time in years their audience is shrinking. When Ethan messages me we need to talk, it reads like a small nervous olive branch set on a battlefield. I decide I will talk but on my terms. The week after the meeting feels like a truce that might be temporary. Like fog after a storm. Investors pull back, and the Vineyard's emails become taut with urgency. My phone buzzes with messages that sound like threats disguised as concern. Claire, our family needs you. We can keep this together. No one says directly that they have been whispering to my bank, but the evidence is there in the bank's strange caution, and in my uncle's tone. The real fight, I understand, will be the quiet one over who decides what a family is allowed to do with its name. I throw myself into work because work is a place where metrics matter and not gestures. My boss, Elena, checks in. You okay? She asks, and when I tell her, she straightens like someone who can't bear injustice. You weren't lucky to get that promotion, she says. You earned it. Small validation lodges in my chest and acts like armor. A friend, Owen, helps me draft the email that lays down the law. Keep your hands off my accounts. Do not contact my lenders. Respect my decision. The world, in its practical ways, Eliza at First Sierra calls with mortgage news that sounds like rescue. She tells me she wants to work with me, and that her bank specializes in mountain properties. She offers terms that make the cabin not just a dream, but a reasonable plan. The universe seems to conspire in small acts of kindness. Ethan calls with a voice that is raw and frayed. Dad said if this fails he will move assets, he admits. He told me he could make it hard for me if I didn't cooperate. The old pattern reveals itself. The matrix of threats and favors that keeps a family's image polished. He says he thought he could fix it from inside. He says he was scared. I listen, and I feel pity, and an ache for the person he might have become without that pressure. But pity doesn't return stolen life. So I do the practical things. I add security layers to my accounts. I request written communication to the bank. I hire a financial advisor and a lawyer. I prepare for the next meeting with spreadsheets and clean numbers. The act of building a fortress around my finances becomes an act of self-respect. They try different tactics. Charm one day, thinly veiled threats the next. My mother leaves a voicemail that sounds tender until it turns to guilt. Can't we make this small? Couldn't you be the bigger person? The bigger person, in their language, always means sacrifice without question. I refuse. I drive up to Oakhurst with Nora, and walk the property at Independent Ridge. The air smells of pine and sun. The porch wood. I imagine hold an old rocking chair. I imagine a wood stove and the sound of rain on a small roof. I sign the reservation. The deed a small steady thing, with my name on it. The closing will be a day of quiet triumph. Because the cabin is not a dagger aimed at the family. It is a place that answers to me alone. Back in town, the Vineyard whispers become a finer, meaner thing. My mortgage pre-approval hiccups. Someone has called my lender, suggested I'm overextended. I send demands in writing for any contact to be recorded. I put tracking on my credit, and change passwords. I document everything. The small acts add up and I feel less vulnerable. Then the storage unit comes like a key idea. Ethan, in a moment of pressure cracking, tells me there are boxes in a storage unit at the edge of town. There are ledgers, he says. Receipts. Photo. Things Dad asked people to make look like gifts. I hear the syllables like cold rain. We drive to the unit together, and the door lifts with a metallic sigh. Inside, the air smells like dust and paper. Boxes sit in patient stacks. There are file folders with neat, practiced labels. We open them. Inside are canceled checks, letters to donors, invoices that match transfers to shell accounts, photographs art-directed, like film stills, a list of talking points in my father's handwriting about how to present contributions as generosity. Under one line in a different hand, a note reads, "Emphasize Claire's gratitude. Present plaque options." I bring the boxes to Mara, the lawyer who moves like someone who has kept her hands steady in storms. She reads the items and does not gasp. "This is evidence." "This is an organized pattern. We can demand demands. We can subpoena records. We can put pressure where it matters." The choice to push the evidence into daylight feels monstrous and necessary. We release a statement that is careful and clear. I want transparency. I want the truth. The Valley's gossip mill shifts into a machine of headlines. My father issues a statement about legacy and tradition, and calls the allegations a smear campaign. The family lawyer sends a threatening letter demanding retraction. Then the uglier things arrive. Anonymous emails suggest I bought the cabin with ill-gotten gains, or that I manipulated my employer to get my promotion. Someone posts a rumor that I'm unstable. The bank's audit becomes more poking than before. It is a nasty dance, but the facts live in paper. Mara subpoenas the storage unit inventory and the chain of custody begins to be legal. The ledger is relentless. Payments that once read as donations begin to match transfers into shell corporation. The voice clip surfaces where my father is heard advising a partner to move funds and clean entries because no one will notice. The public record turns the whisper into a chain. Donors begin to ask questions. The investors begin to slip away. Ethan, under pressure, changes. He stops being the polished heir and becomes the human he has hidden. He confesses that he was manipulated and groomed, and that promises were made to him in exchange for silence. He is not a villain, and he is not a martyr. He is a man who realized his loyalty had been bought with expectation and fear. The legal work is slow and gutting. Auditors look at years of returns, ledgers, and canceled checks. The storage unit items are cataloged and entered into evident. Detectives ask quiet, precise questions. For the first time, the veneer on our family name reveals the supportive scaffolding of favors and phantom invoices, and the machinery of image preservation. In the middle of the legal grind, I close on the cabin. It is an afternoon of strange, small victory. I sign my name, and the papers are not a revenge, they are a declaration. The house will be mine. It will be the place where the only signatures that matter belong to me. I cry a little at the bank window like someone releasing pressure. The unraveling accelerate. Investors who had once dangled checks withdraw. The town's contributors ask for receipts and explanations. My father's public defenses start to sound like a man reading from a script and not from a heart. The more he amplifies, the more the ledger's quiet paper bites. Still, there are costs. My mother's hands become shaky in court when subpoenaed. Aunt Ellen breaks down in ways I had never seen, admitting she had felt fear the way the guilty do. The kind of fear that shapes silence. The small domestic cruelties that had defined our days now sit under harsh fluorescent lights and under sworn statements. It is a strange, brutal clarity. When the first boxes went into evidence, I felt that same curious lightness that sometimes follows a long bruise. The storage unit, the receipts, the staged photographs, the list of talking points, they all fit together like a map. We filed declarative statements and demanded audits. Mara moved like a person who has practiced for this. The legal motion was not theater. It was a careful, forensic thing that turned gossip into paperwork. The reaction was immediate. My father released a statement about the pain of betrayal. He framed the release as a campaign of character assassination. The defense counsel attempted to turn the narrative against me, suggesting motive and a desire for fame. They painted the files as curated by a resentful daughter. Their spin had one advantage: drama sells, and people like to believe in simple motives. But law listens to paper. The auditors followed bank trails and found irregular transfers that had been categorized as charitable distributions and then routed to companies that were effectively shells. The voice clip was damning in a way an allegation never could be. In the tape, my father is heard with casual cruelty, instructing a partner to move funds and tidy entries. He laughs and says things about presenting generosity. He calls the act small and necessary. Ethan sat across from me in a coffee shop one spring morning and told me the truth of how he had been made to feel necessary. Dad told me I was the one to carry the name forward, he admitted. He told me he could pull strings, make sure I stayed employed, make sure I was secure, if I supported the family line. I didn't see it as harm then. I thought I was doing my duty. You were not the villain, I said. You were one of the ways they kept the machine running. He agreed, and for the first time, he didn't try to rationalize his role. He wanted to make amends. He wanted to give testimony that matched the boxes and the ledgers. He had lived inside a story that required his complicity, and he was tired of the shape it had forced him into. Court days are smaller than films make them. The lights are sharp, paper rustles like birds. Our attorneys walk their practiced arcs. The prosecution put the tape, the receipts, and the ledger on display in a way designed to let the jury follow the chain. The defense tried to suggest motives and character assassination tactics. They tried to paint me as a daughter with a grudge. The jury deliberated like a slow storm. We watched, brittle with a mixture of hope and dread. Then came the verdict on key counts. Guilt. Not everyone was indicted. Not every family member was judged. But the ledger had teeth. The judge handed down penalties and orders for restitution, where possible. The town's reaction was a mix of whispers and awkward casserole. Where once people accepted our family's narrative unquestioned, now their trust had fissures. There were bruises we could not fix. My mother's public humiliation was sharp. She had lived for the story, and when the story snapped she was left exposed. Aunt Ellen apologized in a voice that was soft and broken in court. She said she had been afraid. Fear is an actor in many decisions. It does not excuse them, but it is a lens. What we did after the verdict was not melodrama. We rebuilt in small, real ways. The trust was restructured to include independent oversight. Funds that could be traced were redirected to community programs and scholarships. The auditors recommended and the judge approved. The Vineyard lost some of the private sheen, but it did not vanish. People had to decide whether they wanted to support a place that had been so tangled in a family's private manipulations. Ethan showed up in practical ways. He didn't expect forgiveness immediately. He didn't ask for it. He gave his present. He helped with repairs at the cabin, and sometimes brought coffee and sat in a way that felt like a person trying to be present without entitlement. He worked on his own career, under the weight of baggage he had not asked for. My mother came to me with letters she had written over the years and never sent. She had chronicled nights of fear and quiet compromises. She placed the stack in my hands and said she was sorry. The apology is a long process, and I told her so. I told her I could try. I told her I would need boundaries and truth. She agreed with a gravity that felt like the weight of someone who had been small and who now tried be larger in the only honest way she knew: confession. The cabin became a safe, ordinary. I painted a wall the color of pine and hung a small photo of the tasting room's oak table, not as a weapon but as a memory. I planted herbs. I learned to sleep without scanning the phone for the next family crisis. The quiet felt like a ministry, something that allowed me to think in long arcs. People asked me later what the gift I gave myself was. It was not only the cabin, it was the permission to be selfish in the healthy sense. The permission to protect one's life and not to hand it over as collateral for someone else's narrative. It was the act of setting a boundary and standing by it with documents and witnesses. There were legal settlements that were practical. Money spent rarely returns on a ledger, but a portion of funds were redirected to scholarships and programs. that served people who needed them more than the family's tawdry rescue plans served the Matthews name. The judge's orders changed the machinery of the trust so future funds required external oversight. It was not the poetic justice some people crave, it was procedure, and it mattered. The neighborhood began to offer casseroles and odd kindnesses instead of whispers. People that once slewed away now brought small soup. My work did something practical. They created guidelines to protect employees from smear campaigns, and to offer legal aid when personal life bled into professional fragility. The firm became a point of quiet support in the same way a harbor is quiet after a storm. One evening when the sun fell like a promise, Ethan brought me a small framed photograph he had found in a box and had restored. It was me on a tire swing as a child, arms thrown wide and laughing at something the camera had not caught. He set it on my mantel and wrote one small note on the back. "We are here," I replied with the simplest thing I could think of. "I am proud." It was not a final line, it was a small honest truth that fit in a text. The courtroom lights are harsh and then they are ordinary. The verdicts come and the machinery of settlement hums along. We did not get everything back. Money once spent rarely comes home again, but the trust got restructured. Restrictions were placed. Independent oversight was ordered. Donors were contacted. In practical ways, the future of the Vineyard changed. The more lasting thing was not legal. It was the way the small acts gradually changed the shape of our days. Family dinners became smaller and more honest. My mother and I sat over tea and she handed me an album of pictures she had found and wanted me to have. The album contained a photograph of me at 7 on a tire swing. Dirty knees and a grin that needed no audience. She said she had been wrong. I told her I was learning how to forgive. I did not promise erasure. I promised honesty and clear boundaries. There are no tidy endings in these stories. The town occasionally whispers. Late-night shows rerun clips for ratings and people have opinions. But the cabin becomes a place where I make tea that tastes like pine and patience. Where mornings are measured in how much light the kitchen gets. I make small things. I fix shelves. I read books with pages that don't argue with me. The house is not a trophy. It is a room where the signatures that matter belong to me. Ethan rehabilitates himself quietly. He works to earn whatever trust he can without the scaffolding of entitlement. He shows up at the cabin with tools and with coffee. We talk in ways that are less about defense and more about what we will try to be. He has to rebuild his career under baggage he didn't choose. He does it in a way that is humbled, not performative. My mother's public humiliation did not blow away with apology. She faced people who were angry and betrayed, and she took hits that did not belong to a child's lot. She did not shirk. She spoke honestly about fear and family decisions and about how comfortable silence can become when it shields you from risk. She asked for forgiveness in small ways. I told her I would try. Forgiveness is not a single event, it is practice. The oak table remains in the tasting room. It still holds dinners and tours and someone else will likely inherit it. The vineyard goes on but with new rules. Some of the gloss is gone. The image has a seam you can see. But the valley's people began to ask for receipts and they demanded accountability. That is the small power of facts in a world that likes narratives. A year after the glass shattered, I invited friends and the people who had shown up to the cabin. We grilled and drank cheap wine. My parents came late and sat a little apart at first. My mother brought a small album and handed me a raw photograph she had found. Me as a child on the tire swing. She said she was wrong. I said I was learning how to forgive. I did not promise the erasure of what had been. I promised honest. The thing that shifted most is not dramatic. It's the quiet. The ability to make a cup of tea and not taste obligation. The ability to sign a document and have it mean something. The ability to look at the ledger of my life and know where my handwriting begins and ends. People will whisper. The town will have opinions. The evening shows will carve the story into bite-sized narratives. But when I stand on my cabin porch and breathe in the scent of pines, I know the thing I chose was the right one. It wasn't a dramatic revenge. It was a steady reclamation. If you ever find yourself at a table where family expects you to bankroll a story you did not write, keep your paper, keep your numbers, tell the truth into the room. They will gasp. They will try to claw, they might try to disassemble you. But there is extraordinary power in standing with evidence and a small house that belongs only to you. I lift my glass now in quiet company, the chime of crystal a small friendship song. I toast not for other people's expectations, but for the little house with my name on the deed, and for the life I paid for with my own patience. The oak table still stands in its room, the tasting room still welcomes guests, but the story that require me to dissolve has been rewritten. I chose myself.